Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 9 has just released on Netflix and AMC, and we get an episode that gives us the end of Jimmy McGill, the birth of Saul Goodman, and some very reflective moments for Gus and Mike. In this spoiler review, I'm going to be giving you my recap of Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 9, entitled Fun and Games, alongside discussing my general thoughts towards it. But before I get into it, if you want to see more videos on the final episodes of Better Call Saul, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. Also, feel free to check me out on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Instagram at Cortex Videos, which is all linked in the description below. But with that out the way, let's dive into my recap and review for Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 9. So as we learned in the last few episodes, characters that were not present in Breaking Bad were given brutal endings on Better Call Saul. In episode 7, we saw the tragic execution of Howard, and in episode 8, Lalo was killed in a tense gunfight with Gus. And now in episode 9, which is titled Fun and Games, we get an ending for Kim Wexler in the Better Call Saul timeline, and also the metaphorical death of Jimmy McGill, which leaves behind the birth of Saul Goodman. Now, for all we know, we could have more scenes with Kim Wexler left to come, especially when we think about the post-Breaking Bad timeline, but it's clear that this episode is the end of that character in the Better Call Saul one. But regardless, this episode told us that it was all fun and games until everything was over. So let's first recap all the events of this latest episode as we finally reach the landscape of Breaking Bad. Starting with Gus Fring, it appears that having defeated Lalo Salamanca, the Chicken Boss is now set on the path of victory against the cartel that unfolds in Breaking Bad. But we do also get a sign of some reflection from him too, realizing that he can't possibly have a relationship in this line of business. It's something that reflects the circumstances with Jimmy and Kim later on, and it's very in character of him to realize that in a moment of quiet reflection. But before we get to that scene, first we come to a tense meeting that he has to attend involving Don Bolsa, Don Eladio, Don Hector, and the cousins. Hector rightly accuses Gus of setting up the hit on Lalo, and they claim that he knows Lalo was alive. What turns out well for Gus is that Don Eladio doesn't buy Hector's story, even as he sits there in his wheelchair aggressively ringing his bell. So as expected, Gus wins in this case, and Eladio even gives him more territory to control at the end of their conversation. Before Gus can leave though, Eladio does tell him that when he looked into his eyes, as Hector asked for, that he saw hate. He tells him that as long as you know who's boss, then there's no problem. Of course, everything here is wrong from the perspective of Eladio, and this hate is something that really stays present in Gus throughout. Especially with this scene, which ends on Don Bolsa drinking tequila to foreshadow the poisoning incident in Breaking Bad, and Gus looking down at the pool where his partner died, and where Eladio will lie one day too. It's a sign of the inner hate he feels and the start of what will soon be his revenge. But after this very stressful encounter, we come to a scene where Gus tells Mike that he wants construction to resume immediately on the Superlab. Then the two depart in opposite directions. We'll come to Mike shortly, but we learn that Gus heads out to a fancy restaurant, and we get that reflective scene which I was talking about before. To start with, it feels quite out of place seeing Gus sat at a bar, sipping wine and talking happily to a waiter in a long scene, as it makes us wonder what this is truly meant for. But as we get into the scene, we realise that this is really an aspect to Gus that we haven't seen much of before, and an answer to what he truly feels. He speaks to a waiter named David, and it's quite obvious that they both know each other pretty well, with the waiter getting Gus to try a vintage wine. David talks about his life, Gus puts on a smiley face as he does, and it's difficult to imagine that he would let this character we haven't met talk for as long as he does. But of course, Gus does let him go on, and it becomes quite telling that he actually likes this person. It's been long assumed that Gus had a relationship with Max, his friend and partner from Breaking Bad, and I think while he sat at this bar, he thinks of him and the life he could have had. And this is even more telling because after David leaves to get more wine, Gus's face goes from that smiley one to one that's the complete opposite. After reflecting on the death of Max at Eladio's pool and wanting revenge for that, I think he's realizing here that he doesn't need a relationship to get in the way of what he'll do next. With no more problems, he can set in motion his plan to take over and get his revenge. He has no time for a relationship because that would risk the life of the person he cares about. It frames the man we see in Breaking Bad with the brutal business mindset that we know him for. Coming now to Mike and what he gets up to, he also has a very reflective and emotional tie-up for his Better Call Saul arc. After trying to work out every problem that he could to resolve the battle against Lalo, we now watch him chilling out in his living room and watching TV, but things are clearly on his mind. He's of course thinking about Nacho's father, and that is brought back up after looking at the fake ID in his wardrobe and also through looking at his granddaughter's toys. Mike, who is a much more emotional and parental figure in Better Call Saul, can't stop thinking about the death of Nacho. So he decides to make a trip to his father's store and tell him the devastating news to his face. He tells him that Nacho died, that it was quick and painless, and that he has a good heart. He tells him not to worry about the Salamanca cartel because in his words, justice is on the way. And while that justice does eventually come, what Nacho's dad says back is the key difference between a character like him and Mike. He makes it clear to Mike that what he's doing isn't justice, and in fact it's just all revenge. We know he's completely right, and the business that Mike and Gus work in corrupts and leaves its brutal mark on those involved. Like with Gus, it shapes who these men are and exactly what the consequences mean for others. It's nice to get a final moment here with Nacho's dad too, and what he says is a realistic twist on the speech Nacho gave back in episode 3. And that's it for Gus and Mike in this Better Call Saul timeline, because the rest of this episode deals with the heartbreaking consequences for Jimmy and Kim's relationship. The episode begins with a montage that reflects exactly what Mike told Jimmy and Kim to do at the end of the last episode, and it involves going about their normal day. While Kim heads to court, Jimmy goes to his office, and they treat it like any other day. During this, Mike and his men clean their apartment and remove any trace of Howard. And when both Jimmy and Kim return after their normal days at work, it's like nothing happened. But we learn quite quickly that they can't move on from what happened that easily. They try and spend some time at a motel to forget about it, and Jimmy hopes that they can put those horrible events behind them. The line for this episode's trailer is then spoken as Jimmy says to Kim, "One day we'll wake up and brush our teeth and go to work, and at some point we'll suddenly realise we hadn't thought about it at all." Like for a lot of this episode, Kim remains silent to this kind of statement, and we can really feel what she's thinking just through the looks and expressions she gives. She clearly can't move past what's happened. And things only get more stressful the next day, because when they go to Howard's memorial at HHM, the lie that they started of Howard being a drug addict who committed suicide is believed by all. Well, everyone apart from Howard's wife, who in a conversation with Jimmy and Kim is positive that he was clean. She mentions to Jimmy that she knows that he aggravated Howard episode, and while Jimmy tries to claim that he's innocent and just had jealousy towards him, Cheryl isn't buying into it. What deflates her perspective is actually what Kim says to her afterwards, as she tells a completely fake story about Howard doing cocaine when she was still working at HHM. Because Howard's wife heard this from Kim rather than just a con man, it convinces her to believe the drug claims. It makes you sick watching them lie here after what we saw this season, and it's even more devastating that Howard's wife believes this and of course runs to the bathroom crying. But it only gets lower from here. Once Jimmy and Kim get to the parking lot, Jimmy claims that the healing shall begin. It's at this moment where Kim completely realizes that she can't go on this way. She looks at him frozen, kisses him, and then gets in the car and drives off. This could have been a moment where the show leaned back into that Breaking Bad philosophy that Kim has shown multiple times throughout the show, but with her driving off immediately after, it shows us that this won't be the case this time around. That's because the Jimmy and Kim relationship has come to an end in the Better Call Saul timeline. Since the beginning, Jimmy and Kim's on-screen relationship has produced all possible emotions, and while originally the show was trying to convince us that Jimmy was bad for her, things took a turn and we learnt that Kim was just as problematic. They fed into each other's bad side, and Kim finally realised that here. She quit being a lawyer in court, and once Jimmy finds out that she has done so, he rushes home freaked out and tries to once again tell her that they can get past it. He tells her that they should go on a vacation and take a break from everything they've been through. But this is soon derailed once he sees that Kim has already packed up all of her stuff ready to leave. It's all over, and Kim tells him exactly why. It's not that Jimmy's bad for her, it's that they are both bad for each other, and their actions result in serious consequences, as seen recently with Howard. So after all the theories about a tragic death, Kim getting arrested and so on, what we actually got was the more realistic and fitting end to their relationship. A more grown up and emotional conversation between Jimmy and Kim as adults is much more appropriate for Better Call Saul, rather than the more eventful ends that Breaking Bad may have given a character like this. Of course, both shows are brilliant for their own methods, but this just feels more fitting for what we've seen with Kim in this particular show. There was just no repairing the things that had happened, and while a part of Kim wants to stay and try to move on, the other side knows it's too dangerous. It ends with Jimmy and Kim both expressing their love for each other, and Kim replying, "But so what?" And Jimmy just can't reply to that. He's lost the one part of true joy, the light in his life, and the one person who defended him as Jimmy McGill. So for the Better Call Saul timeline, their relationship is truly over. Of course, there are still 4 episodes left, and there's still a lot to be answered surrounding the future. Like, might we see Kim again in the Breaking Bad or post-Breaking Bad timeline? With Gene in Nebraska, they could quite easily bring them back together for the last episode or 2, and maybe the scene that we've previously watched with Gene hanging up the phone on Ed is actually the moment where he decides to meet up with Kim and make things right. It's going to be interesting to see whether Kim does come back for a few scenes, but for now, the McGill and Wexler train is officially over. The episode does, however, have one last turn for us to think about regarding timelines. After the breakup, we get a time jump a few years into the Breaking Bad timeline, telling us that Jimmy McGill is gone and Saul Goodman has arrived. He has his comb-over hairstyle, his colourful suits, and he's now living in that mansion which we saw being raided in the cold open of Season 6. He spends some time in his new mansion using his Bluetooth phone, talking with clients, making deals, and even speaking about public masturbation. But he soon takes his Cadillac over to what we know as his office from Breaking Bad, fully redesigned with the inflatable Statue of Liberty placed on top. He enters to a miserable Francesca just like we knew her before, and the reception is swarming with shady clients. Enter the office and Saul is about to begin his casual day as the crooked lawyer, even saying the line that Chuck said before he died: "Let justice be done, though the heavens fall." On the table is a world's greatest lawyer mug, meaning that he's graduated from second greatest. And that's it for our transition into the Breaking Bad timeline. It'll be interesting to see what they focus on in this period because, like I said, there's still 4 episodes to go, but I think they did bring justice to the prime Better Call Saul events. What happens next will hopefully set us up for that much anticipated Gene timeline too. So what are my overall thoughts on this latest episode? Well, Fun and Games gives us a tragic end to the relationship of Jimmy McGill and Kim Wexler, showcasing 2 fantastic performances from Ray Seahorn and Bob Odenkirk. It's a natural end to everything they've gone through together in these pre-Breaking Bad events, and you can feel the heartbreak on screen in those final moments, even when Jimmy is trying to hold on. It feels completely honest, yet Kim tries to let Jimmy down in the quickest way she can. We knew the end was coming, but watching it actually unfold on screen in this particular way makes it even more of a gut punch. Still, this may be one of the better options for this character to go after everything we've seen and everything she has become involved with. Ray Seahorn really delivered one of the best characters I've seen on the small screen, and after seeing the developing bonds that Kim grew with Jimmy, it makes the moments here where she talks all the more effective. A lot of the time you can feel what she's going through and even what she could be thinking, making it right that she comes to her own conclusions, even as Jimmy rambles on about finding a way to move past. Kim might be able to forget what happened, but she has enough moral processing to know that this realistically just can't happen. The production and cinematography once again captures this in melancholic fashion, alongside the end of Gus and Mike's arc in this pre-Breaking Bad world, making for a perfect contrast and commentary on the no way out situations that this world can bring to the individuals involved. Better Call Saul has never been better, and I think it's only the start of what will come as we now enter the world of Breaking Bad and the world of Saul Goodman. But that was my spoiler review and recap for Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 9. Fun and Games delivers on its title and shows us the end of one passage of time leading into the greater downfall of another. It has one of the greatest cuts I've seen in a TV show, flashing forward to the 2005 era and showing us the complete transformation of a figure we've known as Jimmy McGill for many years. A part of me wanted to see that gradual transformation, but with everything mostly wrapped up and the bad decisions having been made, this transition was effective and a smart way to get us thinking even more about what goes on beyond the events of the previous show. It also leaves us with the possibility of Saul or Gene interacting with Kim, and just imagine the reasons why that would happen or how it would even turn out if it did. But where we go in these final 4 episodes is really a mystery. I do hope we haven't seen the last of Kim, because although tonight's breakup was really impactful and done well, it also doesn't feel like the very final goodbye. I'm actually now buying into that theory I had in my predictions video that Kim might be around for the Gene timeline at the end of the show, and that Jimmy does something to help her. But then again, it did feel like a fitting end to the events of Better Call Saul's time period, so I guess we'll just have to see. Overall though, it was a fantastic end to one chapter, and it really showcased the descent that is now fully complete. I'm giving Season 6 Episode 9 of Better Call Saul a rating of 9.5 out of 10. But to those who have already seen this episode, what are your thoughts on all the events that went down, and what do you think will happen in Episode 10? Let me know down below in the comment section. For more videos on the final episodes of Better Call Saul Season 6, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.